So now that the Dallas Mavericks have sent the Los Angeles Clippers packing to Galveston, what's next for the second round against the Oklahoma City Thunder? First things first, one of the Dallas Mavericks' key rotation players to throw a wrench in some teams' plans by just throwing a completely different look at them offensively and defensively is Maxi Kleber. And Maxi Kleber has a grade 3 AC joint sprain, dislocation, something like that. I can't remember. He dislocated his shoulder on a very hard fall in Game 6 against the Clippers and will be out indefinitely. So that's definitely not the biggest hindrance to the Dallas Mavericks, but it could be a very notable one against this specific matchup. Now, first thing that I want to talk about for the Thunder is their first round matchup was against the New Orleans Pelicans, and keynotes there, Zion Williamson was injured for that series, and their second best player, Brandon Ingram, had just came off of an injury, and Brandon Ingram was practically limited to only mid-range pull-ups, and he really couldn't get anywhere else on the floor. He was not the typical Brandon Ingram we're used to seeing play. I think that kind of leaves us with a lot of questions because that first round matchup was a sweep from the Thunder, but it was practically against a non-playoff team how they were currently constructed. The Pelicans were throwing Jonas Valanciunas at them to try and get points on the board. It was not a pretty series from the Pelicans without their stars either there or even remotely healthy. So when it comes to the Thunder versus the Mavericks, that first round series really does not help us at all. Doesn't give us any type of projections into this matchup. So I wanted to look at the teams and how they match up based off of the regular season and how I think that's going to play out remotely to the playoffs, because I mean, we can look at some of the playoff stats, but it really gives us absolutely nothing. First thing for the Thunder, they are a very good three-point shooting team. In fact, the best three-point shooting team in the playoffs as of right now. The Oklahoma City Thunder shot 34 threes a game at 38.7%. So a very, very good three-point shooting team. The Dallas Mavericks shot pretty much the exact same amount, 34.8, but shot a lowly 33.5%, which is not the worst out of all the playoff teams, but definitely not the best. Still one of the highest volume three-point shooting teams outside of the Celtics and the Pacers, of course, who just launched those things. A couple other stats to consider here between the Mavericks and the Thunder. The Mavericks did average more points than the Thunder. You could argue, I don't really know what you could argue with that. That Pelicans team, I don't know. Like, they were playing all right defense, but I don't know. Was the Clippers defense better than the Pelicans? Don't really know. But the Mavericks were still able to put up 107 points per game against the Clippers, while the Thunder were only able to put up 105 points per game against the Pelicans. Not a big gap at all, just 2 points, but somewhat something to note there, I guess. Offensive rebounds is the main key thing with the Dallas Mavericks compared to the Thunder, because they average 12 a game while the Thunder only average 7. You'd think that the total rebound, there would be some sort of disparity between the two, but they're right there together at 42. The Mavericks did average 2 less turnovers per game, which is pretty reflective of the regular season. The Mavericks didn't turn the ball over that much. The Thunder did in fact foul 4 less times a game than the Mavericks, but the Mavericks were guarding Paul George and James Harden, while the Thunder were guarding a very hobbled Brandon Ingram and a basically number one option CJ McCollum, and he does not have the capability of carrying an offense like that. So I think the fouls are probably going to be around the same range whenever we get to the matchup. The Thunder are really good at forcing turnovers, and the Mavericks are very good at not turning the ball over. That's one thing that I don't know how that's going to play out against the Thunder for the Mavericks. They could be themselves, and they could just start turning the ball over like crazy, because the Thunder really can push that. Now, away from the current playoff stats, matchup-wise, I do think the Mavericks have the overall matchup advantage. Now, the Thunder don't really have massive weaknesses, but one of one of their biggest weaknesses is their size, and size is definitely not an issue for the Dallas Mavericks, at least not anymore. They have two very nice, tall, big centers. Their point guard is 6'7", and they have multiple big wings that they can throw out with massive wingspans. The Thunder at times play practically a 4-guard lineup, and that is going to hurt them on the rebounds just like it has throughout the regular season and the playoffs. But it turns out that those rebound disparities have not made a massive impact for the Thunder losing any games, because as we know, they have not really lost any games. Now, heading into this matchup, one other thing I wanted to touch on was the Thunder were the first seed, basically tied with the Nuggets and with the Timberwolves 1 game behind. They do not get to the first seed if they are not so healthy like they were throughout the season. The Thunder their starting 5 played the most minutes out of the entire league for any team. First in front of the Nuggets at 2, I'm pretty sure. They had a ton of continuity. They did not have to play any games super hobbled, and other than I think SGA missed like, what was it, 8 or 10 the end of the season. Thunder definitely have the continuity going into this matchup. But I feel like this is just another what if scenario, so it doesn't really matter at all. But if the Mavericks have their full roster and they're healthy throughout the season, I have a feeling that they end up in a very similar spot as OKC. And that's why going into the playoffs, a lot of people were not very high on the Mavericks unless they were paying attention to the post-trade deadline Mavericks. This could be very interesting going forward. My prediction is Mavs in 6. I know, crazy, right? Yes, I'm predicting Mavs in 6, mostly because, yes, I know the Thunder are just very good. They also have not gotten slapped in the face yet. The Pelicans were a super easy matchup. I don't think you can take any of those wins as indicative of this team is a for sure championship team, because the Pelicans were just not a playoff team. They did not have their guys. I guess you could say the same for the Clippers, but not really. They still had Paul George, Harden, Zubats. They still had a pretty complete team. Clippers, slightly injured. Pelicans were completely hampered. Kind of rambling at this point, but Mavs in 6 due to size. One more thing, Derek Jones playing the backup 4 behind PJ Washington with Maxey out. That could be either a very good advantage due to the Thunder going pretty small consistently, or it could be a big disadvantage without having that great point of attack defender alongside PJ in the rotation at the same time. Maxey being out definitely spreads the Dallas Mavericks thin, and that might be the downfall of the Mavericks. If the Thunder are just hitting from 3 like they have been and will, this series might be over for the Mavs. But if the Mavericks play their game and defensively lock up like they can and knock down the open threes that they're going to get, because the Thunder 28th in 3-point shots allowed, so the Mavericks are going to definitely get the threes up like the Thunder will. It's just a matter of if they're going to fall or not, and without Maxey there, you never know what PJ and Derek Jones are going to look like. Kyrie and Luka are going to have to be on their A game, of course, but I believe in the Dallas Mavericks in 6.